Introduction. In a world ruled by emotions, the calm man always wins. While most people react, a few calculate. While most people seek love, approval, and validation, a few seek power, leverage, and control. One of the earliest men to understand this truth was Niccolò Machiavelli. He was not born powerful. He was not rich. He was not feared. Yet centuries later, kings, generals, CEOs, politicians, and strategists still study his mind. Why? Because Machiavelli mastered something most people never will: emotional detachment in a ruthless world. This is not a motivational video. This is not about kindness or morality. This is about how Machiavelli trained himself to feel nothing and win. Watch carefully, because once you understand this, you'll never see human behavior the same way again. Welcome to Truth 001. Machiavelli was not evil. He was awake. Before you judge Machiavelli, you must first understand the world that created him. Most people call Machiavelli evil because they read his words emotionally, not historically. But Machiavelli was not writing from comfort. He was writing from survival. He lived in Renaissance Italy, a time when power changed hands through blood, betrayal, and deception. A time when loyalty was temporary, when alliances were tools, not bonds, when rulers smiled in daylight and plotted executions at night. Florence, Machiavelli's home, was not peaceful. It was a political battlefield dressed in art and culture. Families rose to power only to be destroyed. Friends became enemies overnight. Leaders were exiled, imprisoned, or killed, not because they were weak, but because they trusted the wrong people. And Machiavelli watched all of it. He wasn't a king. He wasn't a general. He wasn't protected. He was a civil servant, close enough to power to observe it, but powerless enough to suffer when it shifted. When the Medici family returned to power, Machiavelli lost everything: his position, his influence, his security. He was arrested, tortured, exiled, and in that isolation, something happened. Machiavelli began to see a truth most people avoid. The world is not governed by morality, it is governed by power. Not ideals, not kindness, not fairness. Power. And power does not care how good you are. This is where Machiavelli's emotional detachment was born, not from cruelty, but from disillusionment. He noticed something disturbing. The leaders who tried to be morally pure were often the first to be destroyed. They hesitated. They forgave too easily. They trusted too much. They assumed others played by the same rules, and they paid the price. Meanwhile, rulers who survived understood one thing clearly: people are not as good as they appear. They lie when it benefits them. They betray when it's convenient. They praise you when you're strong and abandon you when you're weak. Machiavelli did not invent this behavior. He simply refused to look away from it. This is why he is misunderstood. Most people want the world to be fair, so they reject anyone who tells them it isn't. But Machiavelli wasn't saying, "Be evil." He was saying, "Stop being naive." He believed that pretending people are good does not make you moral, it makes you vulnerable. And vulnerability in a ruthless system is fatal. So Machiavelli made a decision that changed everything. He would stop judging the world by how it should be and start understanding it as it is. That decision required emotional discipline, because to see reality clearly, you must silence your wishful thinking. You must let go of comforting illusions. You must accept uncomfortable truths about human nature. That's not easy. Most people can't do it.
They prefer stories that make them feel safe. People are mostly good. Hard work always pays. Good intentions protect you. Machiavelli rejected those lies, and that rejection made him dangerous. Not because he was violent, but because he could see through people. He understood that morality without power is fragile. Kindness without boundaries is weakness. Trust without verification is stupidity. This clarity did not make him cruel, it made him awake. And once you are awake, you can never go back to emotional blindness. This is the foundation of everything Machiavelli taught. Before strategies, before manipulation, before fear and control, first came detachment from illusion. And that detachment is what allowed him to win mentally, even when he lost politically. Why being too good makes you dangerous to yourself. Machiavelli noticed something that most people spend their entire lives denying. Goodness, when unprotected, becomes a weakness. This idea offends people, not because it's false, but because it threatens their identity. We like to believe that being good guarantees safety, that honesty protects us, that kindness will be returned. Machiavelli watched reality dismantle that belief. He saw honest men promoted, then betrayed. He saw loyal allies sacrificed once they were no longer useful. He saw kind rulers loved by the people, then overthrown by those closest to them. And he asked a question few dared to ask. What if goodness by itself is not enough to survive? The problem, Machiavelli realized, was not goodness itself. The problem was unconditional goodness, because unconditional goodness assumes something dangerous, that others share your values. They don't. Machiavelli observed that most people are not evil, but they are self-interested. They cooperate when it benefits them. They obey when it's safer. They praise when it's profitable. They betray when the cost is low. So when a good person enters a world like that, they unknowingly advertise vulnerability. Their forgiveness becomes predictable. Their patience becomes exploitable. Their morality becomes a lever. Machiavelli wrote that a man who tries to be good in all situations will be ruined among those who are not. Not because goodness is wrong, but because it creates blind spots. Blind spots make you slow. Slow people lose power. This is why Machiavelli believed leaders must learn how not to be good when the situation demands it. That line alone made him infamous. But he wasn't saying, become evil. He was saying, learn flexibility. Because rigidity, even moral rigidity, is a form of weakness. A rigid person cannot adapt. A rigid leader cannot survive. A moralist breaks when reality pushes back. Machiavelli believed a wise ruler must know how to be generous but not wasteful, be kind but not permissive, be merciful but not naive. He warned against leaders who ruled from emotional guilt. Those leaders avoid hard decisions, delay necessary punishment, fear being disliked. And that fear prosts their authority. Machiavelli understood that authority erodes silently. It doesn't collapse all at once. It leaks. Each unpunished offense, each ignored challenge, each act of misplaced mercy. Over time, people stop fearing consequences, and once fear disappears, chaos enters. This is why Machiavelli argued that cruelty, when necessary, should be swift, controlled, and purposeful. Not repeated, not emotional, not personal. Because disorder causes more suffering than discipline. This is where emotional detachment becomes essential. A leader who feels too much hesitates when decisiveness is required. A leader who seeks approval avoids unpopular but necessary actions. A leader who wants to be loved becomes hostage to opinion. Machiavelli saw this again and again. Leaders destroyed not by enemies, but by their own need to be seen as good. He believed true responsibility sometimes requires you to accept being misunderstood, to carry the burden of unpopularity, to choose effectiveness over praise. And that choice requires emotional strength, because it means letting go of validation, moral vanity, the need to appear virtuous. Machiavelli didn't respect people who called themselves good. He respected people who understood consequences. Because in his world and in ours, intentions do not erase outcomes. Only results do.
Control your face, control the game. Machiavelli understood a truth that still governs power today. The face is the loudest thing you own. Before you speak, before you act, before you decide, your face has already spoken. It reveals fear. It leaks anger. It exposes desire. It betrays uncertainty. And Machiavelli knew this. Anything people can read, they can use. So one of the first disciplines he trained was facial control. Not to appear fake, but to remain unreadable. He observed that most people think they're hiding their emotions. They're not. A tightening jaw, a shifting posture, a sudden change in tone. These are signals, and in power games, signals are weaknesses. Machiavelli believed leaders must master emotional masking, not because deception is noble, but because transparency is dangerous. When people know what you feel, they know what pressures you, what excites you, what destabilizes you. And once that knowledge spreads, you are no longer in control. This is why Machiavelli warned rulers never to reveal their true intentions, not even to allies, because today's ally can become tomorrow's enemy, and secrets don't die, they migrate. He believed that a ruler should appear compassionate, appear faithful, appear humane, appear religious, but internally remain strategic. This idea horrifies moralists, but Machiavelli wasn't teaching hypocrisy. He was teaching survival. Because people do not judge leaders by inner truth. They judge by outward appearance. And appearances shape loyalty. Machiavelli noticed that people are moved more by symbols than by substance. A calm leader creates confidence. A composed leader creates stability. An unreadable leader creates caution. And caution slows down opponents. When people don't know what you're thinking, they hesitate. They test less. They challenge less. They assume you know something they don't. This psychological edge multiplies power without force. Machiavelli also warned against emotional oversharing, explaining yourself too much, defending your decisions emotionally, trying to be understood. These behaviors signal insecurity. Power, he observed, speaks briefly. It does not over-justify. It does not argue emotionally. It does not seek sympathy. It acts, and the silence afterward forces others to adjust. Machiavelli believed the strongest leaders controlled not only their armies, but their expressions. Because once you lose control of your face, you've already lost the negotiation. This is why emotional detachment is not internal only. It is visible discipline. Your stillness becomes a message. Your calm becomes intimidation. Your restraint becomes authority. This does not mean being cold to everyone. It means choosing when to reveal warmth, strategic warmth, selective vulnerability, not emotional leakage. Machiavelli understood that what people don't know about you cannot be used against you, and in a world of watchers, that ignorance is protection.
Detachment is not coldness, it is strategy. When people hear emotional detachment, they imagine a man with no heart, no empathy, no feeling, no humanity. Machiavelli rejected that caricature. He was not teaching people to become empty. He was teaching them to become uncontrolled by emotion. There is a difference, and it is everything. Machiavelli felt anger, he felt humiliation, he felt betrayal, but he refused to let those feelings drive action. He noticed that most people don't fail because they lack intelligence. They fail because they act while emotional. Angry decisions, fear-based compromises, ego-driven reactions. These decisions feel justified in the moment and destructive in hindsight. So Machiavelli separated inner experience from outer behavior. Privately, you may feel everything. Publicly, you must act with calculation. This discipline creates a psychological advantage. Because emotional people burn energy quickly, they exhaust themselves reacting to every stimulus. A detached person conserves energy. They wait, they watch, they let others reveal themselves. Machiavelli believed patience was one of the rarest forms of power, because patience requires emotional strength. Weak people rush, strong people delay. Delay creates perspective. Perspective reveals patterns, and patterns reveal leverage. He also understood that detachment allows objectivity. When you are emotionally involved, you personalize events. You see attacks where there are none. You imagine disrespect. You escalate unnecessarily. Detachment removes ego from the equation. It allows you to ask, what is actually happening? What is the long-term outcome? Who benefits if I react? Most people never ask these questions. They react first, then justify later. Machiavelli trained himself to do the opposite. He believed that power belongs to those who can tolerate emotional discomfort without acting on it. This tolerance is rare. It means sitting with insults without responding, pressure without panicking, uncertainty without collapsing. Most people relieve discomfort through action. They speak, they confront, they explode. Machiavelli endured discomfort silently, and silence, in many cases, won the battle for him. Detachment also allowed him to see people clearly. Without emotional attachment, you notice inconsistencies. You notice timing. You notice shifts in loyalty. You notice who disappears when things get difficult. Emotionally attached people miss these signs. Detached observers don't. This clarity made Machiavelli dangerous, not because he harmed others, but because he couldn't be easily deceived. He wasn't desperate for approval. He wasn't hungry for affection. He wasn't addicted to being liked. Those addictions weaken judgment. Machiavelli believed the desire to be loved often leads to compromise, and compromise in power games is rarely neutral. It always benefits someone more than another. Detachment gives you the ability to walk away without emotional collapse. That ability alone changes how people treat you, because those who cannot walk away are already negotiating from weakness. Machiavelli didn't preach isolation. He preached independence of mind. Feel, but don't obey. Care, but don't cling. Engage, but don't attach blindly. That is emotional strategy.
Why fear is more reliable than love. Few sentences in history have been misunderstood as much as this one. It is better to be feared than loved if one cannot be both. Most people stop reading there. They hear cruelty. They imagine tyranny. They assume Machiavelli was promoting violence. He wasn't. He was describing human behavior under pressure. Machiavelli observed something uncomfortable. Love is emotional. Fear is psychological. And psychology lasts longer than emotion. Love depends on goodwill. Fear depends on consequence. Goodwill changes. Consequences endure. A loved leader survives only as long as people feel satisfied. The moment resources shrink or decisions become painful, love evaporates.
Fear does not. Fear remains even when people are unhappy. Why? Because fear is not about affection, it's about calculation. People ask, what happens if I disobey? What happens if I betray? What happens if I cross this line? That question alone maintains order. Machiavelli understood that societies collapse not because leaders are harsh, but because authority becomes unclear. When rules are not enforced, people test boundaries. When boundaries are tested without consequence, they disappear, and chaos follows. This is why Machiavelli argued that fear, when rooted in respect and predictability, is stabilizing. Not terror, not cruelty, not sadism, but certainty. He warned strongly against hatred. A ruler who is hated invites rebellion. A ruler who is feared but respected creates obedience. The difference is critical. Fear without hatred comes from consistent enforcement, clear punishment, impersonal discipline. Hatred comes from arbitrary cruelty, emotional punishment, public humiliation. Machiavelli rejected emotional violence. He believed punishment should be swift, justified, final. Not repeated, not personal, not emotional. Why? Because repeated cruelty breeds resentment, but decisive authority ends resistance quickly. He observed that merciful leaders who avoid punishment often create long-term suffering. Crime increases, disorder spreads, the innocent suffer. Meanwhile, a firm leader who acts decisively creates short-term pain but long-term stability. This required emotional detachment, because enforcing consequences feels uncomfortable. It makes you look harsh. It attracts criticism. It costs approval. Most people avoid it. Machiavelli did not. He believed leadership is not about being liked, it's about being effective. He understood that fear also creates clarity. People know where they stand. They know the rules. They know the limits. Love is ambiguous. Fear is precise. And in environments where power is contested, precision wins. Machiavelli wasn't advocating fear in personal relationships. He was talking about structures of power, leadership, governance, authority, where sentimentality can destroy systems. His lesson was simple but brutal. If you rely on love alone, you are at the mercy of emotion. If you establish fear with restraint, you control outcomes. That control allowed leaders to think long-term, not emotionally. And long-term thinking is the essence of power.
Why the modern world is more Machiavellian than ever. Many people believe Machiavelli belongs to the past. They think his ideas died with kings and empires. They are wrong. The modern world didn't erase Machiavellian dynamics, it multiplied them. Today, power no longer sits only in palaces. It lives in media, corporations, politics, social platforms, institutions, relationships, and in all these spaces, human psychology operates exactly the same. Machiavelli would recognize this world immediately, because perception now matters more than reality. Social media rewards appearance over substance, confidence over competence, narrative over truth. This is pure Machiavelli. He wrote that people judge more by what they see than by what is. Today, images shape reputations, viral moments decide careers, public opinion destroys faster than armies. Those who understand this control it. Those who don't are consumed by it. Machiavelli also warned that crowds are emotional. They shift quickly, they love passionately, they abandon without remorse. Modern leaders fall for the same reason ancient ones did. They believe loyalty is permanent. It isn't. Attention is today's loyalty, and attention is unstable.
This is why emotional detachment is more important than ever, because the modern world is noisy. Outrage cycles, trends, public judgment. Those who react emotionally are dragged into chaos. Those who remain composed outlast the storm. Machiavelli would also recognize modern politics, public morality, private strategy. Leaders speak virtue while negotiating power behind closed doors. This isn't new. What's new is visibility, and visibility punishes emotional mistakes instantly. One wrong reaction, one emotional response, one exposed insecurity, and your authority collapses. This is why leaders today rely on handlers, speechwriters, strategists. They are practicing Machiavellian discipline, whether they admit it or not. In business, the same rules apply. Companies don't survive on kindness. They survive on leverage, positioning, negotiation, control of narrative. The emotionally reactive lose deals. The overly trusting lose ownership. The naive lose influence. Machiavelli would thrive in this environment because he understood systems, not feelings. Even personal relationships now involve power dynamics. Who cares more? Who is more dependent? Who can walk away? These dynamics are uncomfortable to admit, but they exist, and pretending they don't doesn't remove them. It only makes you blind. Machiavelli didn't create these dynamics, he revealed them, and the modern world rewards those who see clearly. This does not mean becoming cynical, it means becoming aware. Awareness allows choice. Without awareness, emotion decides for you. Machiavelli believed ignorance of power is the greatest vulnerability. Today, ignorance spreads faster than wisdom, which makes emotional discipline a competitive advantage. Those who master it rise quietly. Those who don't burn publicly.
Power does not care about your feelings. Machiavelli reached a conclusion that most people spend their entire lives resisting. The world does not respond to intention, it responds to power. You can mean well, you can try your best, you can act with purity. None of that protects you if you lack leverage. Machiavelli watched good people suffer not because they were wrong, but because they were unprotected. They assumed fairness would shield them. They assumed loyalty would last. They assumed morality created safety. It didn't. Power decides outcomes, not justice, not effort, not emotion. This truth is not comforting, but it is freeing. Because once you accept it, you stop begging reality to be kind. You start preparing to be effective. Machiavelli believed emotional suffering often comes from expectations that reality never promised to meet. When you expect fairness, you feel betrayed. When you expect loyalty, you feel abandoned. When you expect gratitude, you feel resentful. Emotional detachment removes these expectations, not because you stop caring, but because you stop depending. Dependence is the root of emotional pain. The more you need approval, the more power others have over you. The more you need love, the more you tolerate disrespect. The more you need validation, the easier you are to control. Machiavelli didn't teach people to reject humanity. He taught them to reclaim self-command. Because the person who controls their emotional reactions cannot be easily manipulated. They cannot be rushed. They cannot be provoked. They cannot be destabilized. That is real strength. Machiavelli believed freedom begins internally, before armies, before titles, before authority. Internal sovereignty. The ability to remain calm under pressure, clear under attack, focused under loss. This is why he remains relevant centuries later. Because power systems change, but human psychology does not. Those who master themselves outlast those who chase control over others. Machiavelli's legacy is not cruelty, it is clarity.
He stripped away comforting lies and left people with something harder but more useful: truth.
The man who controls himself cannot be controlled. Machiavelli did not teach people how to dominate the world. He taught them how to stop being dominated by it. By mastering emotion, by understanding power, by refusing illusion. This is not about becoming heartless. It is about becoming unshakable. Because in a world that tests you relentlessly, emotional control is survival. Those who react lose. Those who observe win. Those who detach endure. If you remember nothing else, remember this: the first battlefield is always your mind. Win that, and no one can truly defeat you. This is not manipulation. This is awareness. This is not cruelty. This is truth. Welcome to Truth 001.